Dr. McGahan for moderating tonight. Thanks, Joseph, for being here and agreeing, or actually inviting me to debate with you. And just want to thank each of you for being here tonight and just your participation in a debate like this. When I graduated from ULM, my highest grade in a science class was a C. I'll just tell you that as I look out in this crowd right now, I know some of you, and you're smarter than I am, and you're better equipped and more educated to be really defending God tonight than I am. In either case, I do appreciate the opportunity to be here presenting a theist point of view on whether or not God exists. One quick story before I present my case. Many of you are avid sports fans, especially when it comes to football. I can remember watching a very close football game between LSU and Auburn in 2006. LSU was down 3-7. Jamarcus Russell drops back and he makes a pass towards the end zone. The receiver goes up, there's defenders around him, and they all kind of come down together where you can't really tell what happened. Something very interesting happened in this game, though. In a stadium with 90,000 fans, half the fans waved their arms up and said touchdown, and the other half of the fans waved their arms and said no. What was the cause of this? Well, it's obvious. The fans had already determined before they showed up at the game what their position was. They had already chosen their side and picked their champion before the game even started. And so that's why they had their corresponding hand signals for that. But the thing about it is, we need to come here with an open mind and an open heart and to be able to really evaluate the truth. My goal this evening is to show you a clear picture for God's existence. I want us to zoom in, check our worldview in different angles. My hope is that for a few moments we'll stop rooting for our side just because that's who we want to win, but that we'll be fair judges of the real truth. With that being said, I have two main contentions in tonight's debate. The first being that there are sound, rational arguments for theism. The second contention being that there are no sound, rational arguments for atheism. In the second round, I'll respond to any arguments that Joseph makes for atheism. But for now, let's turn our attention to some of the common arguments for a belief in God. Argument number one, God makes sense of the origin of the universe, atheism doesn't. The cosmological argument, which may also be referred to as the argument for first cause, simply offers an explanation for how the universe came to be. It's stated as follows: everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe needs a cause. Beginning with the first premise, we know that anything that comes into the existence is the effect of a preceding cause. Stated another way, everything that moves can't start movement on its own, so it must have a mover. As a theist, I believe the universe has an unmoved mover, and it is God. Concerning the second premise, most scientists agree that the universe had a definite beginning. When we consider the law of thermodynamics and the expansion of the universe, the fact that it had a beginning is inevitable. Assuming that they are right and there was a beginning, a cause is indeed needed. There are only two options. Either someone created the universe or no one created the universe. Which one is more reasonable, I ask? I think Julie Andrews had it right when she's saying, nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever could. Each of us knows that from nothing, nothing comes, so the most adequate explanation is a creator God. Belief in God makes sense of the origin of the universe. Atheism doesn't. Argument number two. God makes sense of the fine-tuning of the universe. Atheism doesn't. The teleological argument, which may also be referred to as the argument for design, simply offers an explanation for the incredible complexity and the apparent fine-tuning of the universe. The argument is stated as follows: every design had a designer. The universe has a highly complex design. Therefore, the universe had a designer. Isaac Newton once wrote, "This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets can only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being." What led him to such a conclusion? Undoubtedly, it was the apparent design and fine-tuning of the universe. Plants, grass, and trees need carbon dioxide but release oxygen. Animals and humans need oxygen but release carbon dioxide. If we were slightly closer to the sun, we would burn up. If we were slightly farther away, we'd freeze to death. If the rotation of the Earth took longer than 24 hours, temperature differences would be too great between night and day. If it were shorter than 24 hours, atmospheric wind velocities would be too great. I could go on, but I think we all get the point and agree on it. The universe is very delicately balanced, and slight variations could cause it to be life-prohibiting or even non-existent. This balance is due to certain constants in the universe. There are essentially two explanations for these constants that allow the universe to exist. The first is it's due to random chance. The second is it's designed to be that way. The atheist chooses randomness to explain away design. The theist says there is intelligence behind it. Albert Einstein once said, "In view of such harmony in the cosmos which I, with my limited human mind, am able to recognize, there are yet people who say there is no God. But what really makes me angry is they put me for such views. I'll go with Einstein on this one. God makes sense of the fine-tuning of the universe. Atheism doesn't. Argument number 3. God makes sense of the origin of first life. Atheism doesn't. Many evolutionists and atheists, as well as creationists, speak as if they know how first life came to be and why man is the way he is. We need to note here that neither side really knows. What we do know is that there are only 2 theories up for consideration. The first option is that God created man. The second is that natural laws over billions of years created man from some primordial soup. Time will not permit me to go into this in detail, but I have 2 main reasons why I reject this thought of from goo to you via the zoo. These 2 reasons are information and intentionality. When we observe even the simplest life forms like one-cell organisms and the building blocks of life like DNA, we see that they display intentionality. That is to say, they appear to have been designed for a purpose. Not only is there apparent purpose, there is a communication of information. Information and intentionality in all other fields of study always point to intelligence. It only seems proper that we apply that standard in science also. It is for these reasons and more that I conclude that God makes sense of the origin of first life. Atheism doesn't. Argument number 4, God makes sense of objective moral values and duties. Atheism doesn't. The moral argument is stated as follows. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore God exists. Objective moral values and duties, also called the moral law, is undeniable. We know it by our reactions, and it is the basis of human rights. It is the unchanging standard of justice and defines the real difference between positions such as Mother Teresa and Hitler. Since we know what is absolutely wrong, there must be an absolute standard of rightness, and that is the moral law. Each of us has this inherent sense of right and wrong, and this doesn't just apply to those of us in this room. The moral law is universal. Certain ethical values do not change regardless of country, culture, or creed. One example of this would be the Golden Rule. Every major culture has some variation of it, with the basic thought being that you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The Christian version is that you love your neighbor as yourself. What is to account for this innate, fundamental view of good and evil, right and wrong, if not God? It seems the most reasonable position to take is that God makes sense of objective moral values and duties. Atheism doesn't. Argument number 5. God makes sense of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Atheism doesn't. Undoubtedly, history's most discussed person is Jesus Christ. This simple carpenter from Nazareth has shaken our world that no one before or after him did in that way. Even saying the name Jesus seems to bother some. After 2,000 years, he's still intimidating people. Why don't the names of Buddha or Gandhi or Confucius stir us like the name of Jesus Christ? My argument is simply this. Jesus rose from the dead. His resurrection from the grave unnerves people because it is such a stark reminder of not only our own death, but the existence of a powerful and holy God. To summarize the Apostle Paul's statement to the church in Corinth, if Jesus was not resurrected from the dead, then the entire Christian faith is worthless, a waste of time, and we are to be pitied more than all men. I agree with St. Paul, but if the resurrection is true, if Jesus really did defeat death and offer us the power to do the same, then as Christians we are to be envied more than all people. Clearly, when it comes to the resurrection, a lot is at stake. So is there evidence for this apparent resurrection from the dead? Yes, in fact, there is more evidence than can be presented here tonight. But the 3 most verified truths in it that are most widely accepted are the empty tomb, the eyewitness testimonies, and the growth of the early church. These 2 minutes. These 3 facts alone are so powerful on many levels, but probably the most important thing to note about these 3 is that they are affirmed by the most liberal critics and skeptics. In today's scholarship, there is almost no debate that Jesus' tomb was empty. There were multiple eyewitnesses that claimed they saw Jesus raised from the dead, and Christianity experienced its birth, if you will, all because of their belief in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I believe the resurrection to be true, as do many others, and only God makes sense of this life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Atheism doesn't. Argument number 6. God makes sense of my own personal experience. Atheism doesn't. Let me state from the beginning of this point that I realize this is not an objective argument for God's existence. However, that does not mean the point doesn't carry any weight. In fact, this one argument alone is more powerful than all the other arguments for the person who's experienced it too. Simply stated, I along with millions of other people around the world have experienced a real relationship with God. If I could make one and only one challenge tonight, it would be that we would not be so distracted with the existence of God that we miss out on the experience of God. I want each of you to know that God can be immediately known. The Bible says that if we draw near to God, He will draw near to us. And if we seek Him with all of our heart, we will find Him. If we so choose, we are able to approach God in faith and begin a relationship with Him. It will change your life. Many of you are nodding right now, and that's because you know that God's changed your life too. God makes sense of these experiences. Atheism doesn't. In conclusion, I have two main contentions in tonight's debate. The first being that there are sound, rational arguments for theism, and the second being that there are no sound, rational arguments for atheism. I've just presented 6 arguments for theism. What is the conclusion of these 6 arguments? God makes sense. Atheism doesn't.